Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is entitled Self-Interest. And we're going to explore both the self and the nature of interest. Now, exploring what self is it in the best interests of is a big part of what we're going to talk about today. And knowing who you are and knowing which self we want it to be in the interest of is a key. I'm reminded of a wonderful John Lennon line that says, "How can I go forward when I don't know which way I'm facing?"
Not unlike the George Harrison line we quoted the other day about, if you don't know which way you're going, any road will take you there. John Lennon says, life is what happens while you're making other plans. Those guys were deep.
Indeed they were.
Yeah, and obviously...
And they always kept the beat, too.
They did. Well, self-interest, this is a big topic to me, this idea of self-interest, because I have questioned all of my life what motivates people, what motivates me, and what motivates other people. And I notice in debates about economics, usually it's pointed out that capitalism is a superior form of economics to socialism or communism because it allows for the inherent self-interest of somebody who wants to work hard or put a lot of energy into going to school and getting trained. And all of that made perfect sense to me. But then when do we connect to the community? When do we start volunteering at the Red Cross, or being in the service clubs like the Rotary or the Kiwanis? Where's the give-back element in self-interest? And I struggled with it for a while, and one day I heard Nathaniel Brandon on the radio talking about self-esteem, and it occurred to me that the self evolves from a separated self in which self-interest is just in me and no consideration at all for how other people are impacted, to a self that little by little begins to care more about spouse and family and continues to mature and evolve and care about their community and their nation and maybe even their world if we can get past nationalism. And why don't we call ourselves humans instead of saying, look, that's American ingenuity? Well, why isn't that human ingenuity? So, to me, the dynamic of the self is a great place for us to begin.
If we start at the very beginning, at birth, it's in our self-interest to get fed, and all we're looking for is the breast and sleep. And that's basically it. And when there's any uncomfortableness, we can't tolerate that, so we make loud screaming noises and we let people know that this is not okay. There comes a point when our self-interest becomes pleasing our parents. And our self-interest goes outside of ourselves, especially with dominating parents or parents who are overbearing and overcaring. Our self-interest becomes in protecting ourselves from their wrath, from their disapproval, from their disciplining us for being who we are instead of being who they want us to be. And so our self-interest gets all messed up with pleasing other people and living their lives. Now, at some point, as we move into teens, as we start to evolve our consciousness, we realize we have to separate from parents, and there's this rebellion that goes on in most people's life as they start thinking, I'm not going to be living my life pleasing my parents. I'm going to live my life selfishly just for me. And then eventually, in most women and many men, it evolves into, I want to live my life with my family and with my community and with my planet.
It's funny you'd say it that way, because recently I was thinking about, well, at the time, she was just a friend of mine. We went to high school together. She was a couple of years, 2-3 years ahead of me. And right after high school, got her own place, right? And she could have her friends over. And we were hanging out there one day, and she offered us some ice cream. And I know it sounds stupid. That's why I'm mentioning it. That became, in that moment for me, the symbol of freedom, liberty, and independence. You mean you can have ice cream anytime you want?
You don't have to ask your mommy's permission?
Yeah. That's self-interest, right? That's the break you're talking about.
Yeah.
From, it's in my self-interest to please my parents so that I can benefit, right? And that in children makes sense. Kids are dependent or reliant upon the parents, but it becomes a dysfunction when we never transition in adulthood to a kind of what would you say, emotional independence, if we're still playing that game of codependence,
right,
or in the drug and alcohol community, it's enabling, right? Trying to please other people to earn from them permission to be okay with who you are. That's a lot of work, and in the end, doesn't work anyway.
It's because you never actually get your own self-interest in mind. You go from your self-interest being pleasing your parents to pleasing your girlfriend or boyfriend to pleasing your boss to pleasing your mother-in-law to pleasing whoever else is out there in the world. And many, many people live their entire lives with the idea of it's in my self-interest to please these other people. That's the primary thing I need to do is please these other people. Now, I think it can evolve to the highest level, which is it's in my self-interest to please this us thing, which is either the marriage or the family or the community, to see it all as one thing. But when we're saying it's in my self-interest to please them, not to please the us, but to please just them, then we're living our lives wearing a mask. We're living our lives playing a character, because it's not who we really are to be living our lives just to please other people.
We are very confused around this, even the semantics of it. I was listening to my iPod on an airplane flight, and Alan Watts started talking about what it meant to be self-conscious. And I got to a point where I just had to turn the iPod off or put it on pause and think about what he was saying. And I realized this tape was 40 or 50 years old, actually. But I realized what had happened is that self-conscious had gone from a word that means to be aware of your existence, to be aware of yourself. It had somehow transformed or twisted itself into an almost opposite meaning, to be concerned with what you think other people think of you.
Yeah, to be shy and embarrassed about what you think other people think of you.
Yeah, people say don't be so self-conscious, meaning don't be worried about what other people think. That's not what it means to be self-conscious.
And in the 50-year-old tape, when Alan Watts said self-conscious, he meant conscious of self.
Yeah.
He meant self-conscious.
And somehow we've turned the word around.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And self-conscious, what does that mean? Are we aware of ourselves? This is a question everyone listening to us now can ask right now. When you're aware of self, are you primarily and essentially aware of your existence and how it feels to be in this earth suit? And to think your thoughts and to monitor mindfully your mental and emotional nature? Or is it more likely, I think, especially when we're stressed, a focus on what do other people think of me? I know high anxiety people are not, their self-loathing is not direct, it's indirect. It's always, I'm looking in the faces of other people. I'm looking in the behavior of other people to understand myself, and not a very direct reflection.
No, not at all, especially when you come to really realize, as you think about what do other people think about me, mostly it's they don't care. You are not a significant factor in their consciousness. Yeah, I mean, you're a fleeting thing that goes in and out, one of those little streams or, trails. So
can I say I've employed that a lot in my life, learning especially recently that if I've embarrassed myself or I'm concerned about having said something stupid, I just remind myself that they probably didn't get it in the first place. And if they did notice, they've forgotten by now. So you're the only one that remembers why I carry it around. It's a nice little tip. Oh, they probably forgot about it by now. Yeah, it works.
It does. So if you're being self-conscious, that is, conscious of yourself, and you realize that your primary focus is to please other people at your own expense, to do things that you don't really want to do just so other people will think good things about you, then you're focused on the wrong self. Because your higher self wouldn't want that for you. It wouldn't think it's in your self-interest to please other people at your own expense. Thinking about other people primarily first is not in your self-interest. Thinking about the team that you and those other people make together as a couple or as a family or as a community, that could be in your enlightened self-interest. But to think of them over you is never in your self-interest. And so if you're living your life as so many do, with the primary function being to put on this mask, to play this character that pleases other people at your own expense, then you're not doing what's in your self-interest.
How do we know that there is such a thing as a higher self? Not just a better nature than we are now, better to ourselves, for ourselves, of ourselves, and on behalf of other people. How do we know there is really this polarity almost, this much more inclusive self? I think there are many ways to see that. One that comes to mind is the story that's often told about the Titanic, and as that ship was going down, there were many men and women who gave their lives, older people, who just stayed in their suites, and they knew there were not enough lifeboats, and so it's just like, well, we'll just stay with the boat. And others who gave up their seats so that the women and children could go first. And yet there were also men who dressed up like women to try to get a seat with the women and children on those initial lifeboats. Now, I would argue that those are not two different kinds of people, that the ability to go either way is within everyone. We have a shadow side, a side that is capable of being very selfish, and extremely so, to allow people to die unjustly, just out of your own warped sense of self-interest. But the people who sacrifice for others are people who somehow see the other pole of that, a self-interest in sacrificing, in maybe whatever the nature of the sacrifice. It could be health, it could be money, it could be risking your life altogether. People find that to be in their self-interest. So I think the potential to go either way is in all of us. It's just a matter of who we think we are. And if we don't know we have this higher self, we might be tempted to be the false self, the egoic self. And that's the part that acts the way it acts because it feels like it and never really considers consequences to other people.
Yeah, it's the part that lives out of fear, essentially. And that egoic self, that shadow part of you, is, to me, the best proof that the higher self exists. Because if there's a quote-unquote lower self, if there's a dark shadow self, there has to be a high, bright, counterbalancing higher self. That's the way the nature of the universe works. It's the yin and the yang.
The duality of it.
It's the duality of it. So there is this higher self, and I guess the best evidence that most people have is they've touched it. They've been there. They've felt it at one time or another. It comes frequently when you move into alpha, when you move out of the stress world into your imagination world. But anytime you're feeling totally safe, anytime you're feeling full of love, lovable, loving, anytime you're feeling joyful and ecstatic and excited, that's the higher self. That's the part that has put down the fear of being attacked, of being endangered right now. The ego part has quieted down, and what has emerged, once the ego's voice, which is so loud most of the time, is quieted down, what emerges from that quietness is this quiet confidence that results in an intellectual experience of aha, that knowing, that that mental thing that happens when you just know it's right. It happens in that feeling of relief, that emotional experience of all that tension that's built up, and now it's the relief, it's gone, and in a physical experience of tension being replaced by complete relaxation. It's an obvious experience when you feel safe and when you feel joy and when you feel love and when you're free of anger and fear and sadness and contempt and disgust and all those negative emotions. They're not being experienced right now, and all you feel is the love. That's the higher self. All you feel is the body is relaxed, the emotions are calm and quiet, the mind is clear, and it just feels like love. Yeah, that's the higher self.
That's what it is. That's one of the many qualities of love as consciousness. I think this is a direct challenge to those who really like the Ayn Rand stuff, for example. I think they call it objectivism. And, her two classics are The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Young people trip onto these and they freak out. And because they express a principle, and it's not wrong, this idea Ayn Rand also wrote a smaller book called The Virtue of Selfishness. It's not wrong. It's just that it's only part of the story.
Yeah, it's incomplete.
Yeah, there's a higher self. And her protege, Nathaniel Branden, has never talked about this. They believe in evolution. They understand why a flu mutates, and bacteria and virus and all life forms are evolving, and that means our consciousness, our awareness is evolving. But so far, the experts on self-esteem, like these two, Ayn Rand and Nathaniel Branden, are not considering the impact of this evolution of consciousness on our impression of self. We can see it in a marriage where I would give my life for you. I would do anything for you. I would, and then the kids come in. You go, well, would you give your life that one of your kids, in a heartbeat, of course, yeah. I'd probably do it for the dog, In some families, there's so much love and unity and harmony. And yet the self-esteem people have not addressed this phenomena. Self-interest doesn't switch from I care only about myself to the exclusion of everyone else, and then suddenly we're more harmonious and care about everybody else and don't regard ourselves. That's not the case at all. It's a nice glissando. It's a gradual fading in, if you will, of the journey from the separative self, which doesn't see a connection or an impact to other people, just doesn't even consider the consequences of his or her behavior often, to a person that as they mature, as they grow, especially as they deliberately dedicate themselves to getting on some kind of spiritual path, that evolution of self now includes your family, and then pretty soon your neighborhood and your community. I love that word, means with unity, community, your community. And then, as I say, your state and your nation, and why not your world? Why can't we go on to one world consciousness? Honoring the diversity of the cultures and the importance of self-respect. Ultimately, you are unique, and both things are true. This is a kind of a spectrum, I think, that runs between those polarities. It's not an either-or, you or me. It's a you and me.
Yeah, a couple of CEOs I know, contrasting stories. One of them, the game was to make as much money as possible, and so he would buy companies and sell them and, close down the parts of it that aren't necessary and fire lots of people and put these things together and then put that together and sell it for more and buy another company. And he made hundreds of millions of dollars doing this, putting lots and lots of people out of work and making as much money as possible. And then this other CEO who started a company and became a family and grew the family and loved every minute of it. Didn't make anywhere near as much money, but had a wonderful, wonderful life and, ended up wealthy. Well, which one did what was in their self-interest? Because, as you may have guessed, the one who bought and sold all those companies ended up being miserable and alone, and nobody liked him. He was everybody's enemy. And this other one is this revered, loved, person that everybody will say in their prayers every night. I mean, what's in your self-interest? You really have to take a look at. The bottom line is not how much money can I make. I've seen that. That doesn't create happiness.
The story about the New York businessman who's on vacation in Mexico, and he's in this rather remote area and runs into this fisherman and, how was your day? Fine, thank you. And how many fish did you catch? And I'm just curious, you don't mind me asking, how much money did you make doing that? And that looked really nice. And so it's pretty much what you do, this one little boat, you catch a few fish, and the Mexican fisherman says, yeah, and then I go home and I'm with my family, and we have dinner together and enjoy the evening. It's very beautiful here. And businessman said, yeah, I can see that, but what if you had a second boat? And the story goes on and on about, well, Mexican fisherman says, well, then what would I do if I made more money? Well, he said, well, then you'd buy a fleet of boats and make even more money. And you can imagine where the story goes. And the Mexican fisherman says, but what's the point of all of this? I could own 100 boats and 1,000 boats and all this money. And the businessman looks at him incredulously and says, are you kidding? Then you could retire. and settle down in Mexico with the little boat and spend time with your family. It's it's total pulling back the curtain on the American dream. There's nothing wrong with stuff, nothing wrong with the security and the freedom that we get from financial prosperity, but for what purpose, for what end? And to be selfish, interestingly, is not to behave only in your self-interest, but to recognize that there is a larger, more harmonious self, and I can learn to be selfish in an enlightened way. Enlightened self-interest is not selfishness, I'll say, where I do consider that prosperity is more than what I have, but how much do we have? And now we're getting into those qualities of belonging, of love, of harmony that, as they say, money can't really buy.
Yeah, quick, off the top of your head, which is more important, more stuff or more love?
Yeah,
that's easy. It's really not a hard question when you put it that way. And so when we spend most of our time pursuing more stuff, we take away from our ability to pursue more love. And the way you pursue more love is to become more lovable, become more loving, and then you will get more love. Give more love, get more love. So what's in your self-interest? That's a very simple, easy question that you actually can get the answer to by asking it yourself and waiting for the answer. Instead of trying to figure it out, because what's in my self-interest is not a logical question. See, generally speaking, what's in human beings' self-interest, that you could say maybe could be logical because there may be a general answer for human beings. But for you individually, there's no general logical answer for you individually. Your answer, what's in your self-interest, is going to be absolutely unique to you. So if it's different for each person, it's not logical. It's got to be more subjective than objective. It's got to be more emotional. So when you ask yourself, what's in my self-interest, what you're really asking is your emotional nature to say, what would please me, what would fulfill me, what would complete me, what would make me feel like I'm making a difference and doing something special. It's what would make me feel is what you're looking for to the answer to the question, what's in my self-interest?
This brings us to the idea of consciousness as a synonym for the word love, and vice versa. This, for me, certainly was a big breakthrough. I sat back in my chair. I was in a class on esoteric philosophy, and I sat back 35, 40 years old and went, well, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't somebody tell me this long ago? That consciousness or awareness, which metaphysically is pretty much all that there is, right, is love, in that both are magnetic. Now, there's more than that to love. Love is radiatory, it's cohesive, but it's magnetic. And that means on the spiritual dimension, like attracts like. And that which we're interested in, a metaphysician would argue, has been attracted to you magnetically by the very frequency of your consciousness. The nature of the vibration of your consciousness is what attracts interest, thoughts, emotional feelings. Most of us just assume, even if we've never been educated along these lines, that we're generating the thoughts we think, that we're somehow producing or generating, fomenting the emotional feelings. They're coming out of us. Well, in a sense, they certainly are coming out of us, but what if it's primarily a matter of thoughts as forms, as separated things, feelings as forms, separated things that have a charge, and consciousness attracts them? Take that position and then look at your stream of consciousness. Look at what your mind is thinking and what your emotional nature is feeling when you just sit back and freely associate. It's fascinating, and yet most people won't do it. They refuse to do it. They pretend they don't have time to do it. And why would I want to know myself? I'm so busy knowing other people and judging other people and controlling other people. I have no time and interest in myself. And of course, if you say it that way, it's patently absurd, especially when you remind yourself that you're unique, that no two beings are exactly alike. It reminds me of the sign in the restaurant in Big Sur that says, chew your food well. If you don't, who will? If you don't understand yourself, you can't delegate that responsibility. Discovering and then developing who you are is one job you just can't delegate to somebody else.
And whether or not you take responsibility for those thoughts coming from you or through you, it's arguable. You have to take responsibility for which ones you pick to pay attention to. And that's where the real power of self-interest comes in. Because, you've got lots of thoughts. Maybe they came from outside. Maybe they came from inside. I don't know. But what I do know is it was me that chose to focus on that thought or that feeling, or that thought-feeling spiral, as it usually turns out, whether it be a positive, uplifting one or a negative, down-bringing one. It's me that made that choice. And so what's in my self-interest is to take responsibility for that perception of what's going through my stream of consciousness and choosing to pay attention to what's most important to me, what interests me. Now, why does something interest me? It's because there's something in me that resonates with it. There's something unique about me and that thing out there that I'm finding interesting that is magnetic, that connects, that people who become world-class at something discover early in their childhood this gift, this talent, this ability, and this passion or interest for doing something over and over and over again until they become great at it. When you take children in school and you see some of them are interested in this subject or some of them are interested in that subject, there's a reason for that. There's a connection that they have automatically to it. Now, not to say that connection can't be manufactured. If you're not interested in something, you can get yourself interested in something. You can consciously, purposely make yourself interested in something. But what's most fascinating, I think, is to figure out what it is you're just naturally, automatically interested in. How do you do that? One of the things I learned first about this whole mind thing is if I want to find out something about me, I got to ask me. I can't read it in a book. I can't ask my mom. If I want to know why am I interested in something or what am I interested in, I've got to ask me. So early in my life, around 7 or 8 years old, I started closing my eyes and asking myself questions like what am I interested in, or why would I be interested in that, or why am I not interested in that? And then learned to listen for the answer. Not to be like needing to hear it right away, just to be willing to relax and sort of like a memory coming out of the mist, just to let it bubble up and come to my awareness, and call it meditation or reflection or introspection, whatever name you want to put on it. It's really the best way to determine what's in your self-interest.
Intuition or realization are words I like a lot. I'm also thinking of the phrase to pay attention. What a odd turn of a phrase that is. And then listening to you, to turn my attention to. There's again a fascinating, what do we do when we turn our attention away from something? Well, I don't want to look at it. I'm going to look in any other area I've turned my attention away from. Or it could be a phrase, and then he turned his attention toward something. Well, notice when we do that, it's not so much I'm turning my attention toward a specific thought. I form an intention to turn my attention to a general field or a general area. And to me, that's what the consciousness does. It turns its attention, and then you attract. Then the thought flows in, or the series of thoughts. But they're not there when you turn your attention towards something. It's not something specific, I'm arguing. It's something very general, and you have to wait then for the thought stream to come in. It's fascinating to me, this whole idea of mindfully watching the thinking process. And it may be a little confounding to a beginner, but you said you learned to do it at 7 or 8 years old. I think kids all do it. It's just that sometimes we forget that we can trust that and develop it, and we go to school and we're going to get trained to look in every other direction. Not too many school teachers, public, private, charter, whatever, are teaching mindful contemplation, unfortunately. Hopefully we'll see that real soon. Can you imagine teaching contemplation in school?
Well, more than ever before, it's starting to happen in some schools. It's a step in the right direction, at least. And yeah, I did learn it really early in my life, and I think all of us learned it really early in our life, but we got taught out of it. They tell us, quit daydreaming, get your mind out of the clouds. Well, it's daydreaming that, in fact, is that entry point into the imagination, which is where those interests come from. They don't come from your memory. They come from your imagination. They don't come from logic. They come from emotion. They don't come from thinking. They come from feelings.
Well, remember, memory is imagination.
For the most part, that's true. Memory is the way you remember last time you remembered it, and you didn't see it the way everybody else saw it. You saw it the way you saw it, and it's sort of partly memory and partly imagination right from the beginning.
Well, I guess better said, what I'm saying is you have to use the imagination to draw upon the memory, even if it's a separated thing. But we also see how malleable memory is.
Oh, indeed.
Every time you remember something, you're remembering the last time you remembered it, not the original time.
Right, and like the game of telephone, it changes a little bit. Which is why a husband and wife could have the same experience and totally different memories of that experience.
That's not the way I remember it.
Somehow I remember it very differently than that. So when we access our memory or when we access our imagination or our curiosity or intuition and ask ourselves about ourselves, when we explore ourselves, when we sit down and block the rest of the world out to find out what's in our self-interest, what we come up with are those things that cause us the most emotion, those things that titillate us, excite us, that cause us to have the most powerful feelings inside of ourselves. It starts with a general idea. Like you said, it's not like you start with the thought of the whole grocery list you need. The thought is, I need to go to the store. And then that moves your consciousness out of the whole stream of consciousness. Going to the store was just one of a million thoughts. You picked, I need to go to the store. Now you start to think about, what do I need at the store? And people do that different ways. Some people walk down the aisle of the supermarket in their mind and pick. Some people take their last week's list and But the process that goes on from there of going from the big picture of I've got to go to the supermarket down, winnowing it down in deductively essentially to coming up with what items I need to get at the supermarket. Now, why do I need those items? Well, some of them come from necessity. I need these for survival. Some of them come from, I don't really need the chocolate, but it sure sounds good to have something. And so exploring, why am I interested in those particular food items? Why, that's understanding yourself better. That's exploring what's in the nature of your self-interest.
I think what's so confusing and challenging to people when you present them with the idea of mindfully watching their thoughts is they believe they have to think about the thinking. There's a really old mystical saying that you cannot think your way to God, for the thoughts that are like thought forms or stair steps that might take you in that direction would ultimately stand between you and that ultimate goal of the absolute. Sort of a smart idea. So how do you get there if not by thoughts?
That's kind of why they say you can't put a name to God, because it puts name in between you and yeah.
And of course would have a beginning and an end.
And it would define this thing as God as a thing, and
and therefore not this thing.
Right.
That's exactly the concept in all of that. But what can we do? What are we doing when we're mindfully aware of our interest, when we turn our attention away from one thing or turn our attention, as Steve was describing, towards something? It's not that you think about the thoughts. You simply observe the thoughts without thinking. And if that sounds confusing, I'd have you consider that you do that when you listen to music, especially music that you love that is free from lyrics. All right, like could be classical music or any kind of instrumental music. Or maybe you're like me and you don't listen to the lyrics anyway. I know most people, Steve especially, you love lyrics. You're listening to the lyrics. Well, then you're thinking. But if you go to just the feeling of the music, let's say classical music that generally does not have lyrics, the melody, the harmonies, the rhythms, the dynamics, loud and soft, the speed variations are designed to carry you away. You surrender, like Calgon, take me away, carry me. You surrender to the music. That's mindfulness. So let's not get too confused. You know how to do this. You can exist. You can contemplate. You can be mindfully aware of a thought process or a set of feelings you're going through without having to always slice it and dice it with your mental nature. Again, It's not that you have to stop thinking in order to meditate or contemplate or reflect on your attention, on your interest, on your self-interest. When you do that, the thoughts begin to quiet all by themselves. You get the order straight. You contemplate to quiet the mind, and then the emotional nature will begin to calm. All of it is a process of convincing the brain, the amygdala in particular, that you're really safe enough to have this focused attention experience. Usually we're like most little woodland forest creatures. We're so nervous, so high-strung, and yet that's why they've survived. You look at the average animal out in the forest or the meadow, they're pretty highly wired. They're pretty nervous. We don't have to do that if we don't want to. We can create, we have largely created a safe enough lifestyle, in spite of what politicians might tell you, that we really can find time to relax and mindfully watch your thought process, watch your feelings, become aware of the extent to which you're playing a role or a character to please other people, balancing that with the trust in the self that will allow you to fall back on your true nature and take a risk. What if you just allowed yourself to be who you really are? And if you don't know what that is, risk it. Just let that person come out. Not foolishly, you monitor your speech, you monitor your behavior. You might make a few mistakes and go home at the end of the day and rethink this or that. But it's a lot easier than putting on a mask and writing the script and playing a role that's primarily intended to please other people. I think what you'll find is your true self-interest has a desire, includes a desire to be harmonious and to find solutions where everybody wins.
And so, at least once a day, virtually every day of your life, you allow yourself to feel safe enough to close your eyes and do this thing called sleep. You have it in your mind that in the next 6, 8, 10 hours, nothing bad's going to happen to me. I can let go and be unconcerned about the external world for this period of time. We do that every day. Well, what we're suggesting in your self-interest is that other times during the day, you get yourself to feel that same kind of safety. And you say, I'm going to be able to close my eyes now for a little while, maybe only a couple of minutes or 5 minutes. I'm going to be able to close my eyes now, and everything's going to be okay. I mean, just like when I go to sleep, the world's going to go on, but it's going to go on out there. I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to find time to go towards sleep, because that's really the key. You have to move towards sleep. You don't have to go very far, but you have to move away from stress and towards sleep. And so I'm going to do the things I do when I want to fall asleep. I'm going to get comfortable. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to start to daydream. I'm going to let my mind just go wherever I want it to go. Now, most of the time, that's what our mind does when we're out of stress, is it just goes down these streams of consciousness, these trains of thought. And at times when something sticks out with emotion, we grab onto it, and then we apply purposeful, applied thinking to that. We consider that concept, and we move our thoughts in that particular direction. Well, you have the ability in these states to move your thoughts in the direction of what is in my best interest, what is in my self-interest, what do I need to have or be or do to feel more fulfilled, to feel better about myself, to do more wonderful things in the world. Take some time every day, go a little bit of the way to sleep, and daydream about what it would be that you could do or become or have that would be in your self-interest and in the interests of everyone else, because I think taken to its highest point, self-interest becomes this almost global, enlightened self-interest.
In the ageless wisdom, there is an understanding that virtually everything that we do that's dysfunctional or that can become dysfunctional is seek control, seek approval, and judge. And if you reflect on that for a while, you can see how that pretty much does cover it. And so if you were able to give that up, even for short periods of time, give up the need to petition others for approval or just worry about whether you're good enough, and then give up the judgment, the constant, I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it's bad, it's right, it's wrong. Well, who cares? What if you just decided it didn't matter? You didn't have to judge it. Because, number three, you don't have to control it. What if you could just find 3 to 5 minutes, much less 20 or 30 minutes every day, where you just stop those 3 activities? I'm not going to petition the world for approval. I'm not going to judge and categorize and pigeonhole and have to figure everything out and try to find its place in the larger order of things. What if it just is? And what if I don't have to control anything? That leaves you with self-interest. An interest not merely in the separated self, but an interest in how that apparently separated self connects to all things. You just got to put down those 3 activities. The need for approval, the constant judging and categorizing, and the search for control. Can you put it down for just a few minutes at a time? Maybe just once a day. See what happens. I suggest you'll become interested in a self that grows and expands every day to be more and more inclusive.
And I suggest we put it down, those 3 things, right now, as we take a guided imagery audio journey into the place we call paradise, into that place where you find your higher self in paradise. That amazing alpha brainwave state, lower than the stressed out beta state, higher than the sleep or dream states. It's a daydream-like state, focused concentration, amplified passionate interest. It's the only state where all of your conscious mind is brought to bear by the focus, and all of your subconscious mind is brought to bear by the passion, and that focused passion creates this amazing state, this altered state of consciousness we've known about for thousands of years, this hypnotized, this mesmerized, this totally passionized state that we call paradise. It starts by feeling safe. So it starts with closing your eyes, just like you do before you go to sleep, closing your eyes, getting comfortable wherever you are, and taking one slow, conscious, deep breath. And as you release, find in your mind your place of perfect peace, your paradise.
And in the next few moments, you'll find the frequency of your thoughts beginning to slow. You'll find your emotional nature becomes a little more calm with each passing moment. And of course, you're not going to speak for the next few moments while you allow us to guide you. And your physical body is still. And your brain is watching you as your breathing continues to now be slow and even, and it perceives you as safe and relaxed. In this state of mind, I'd like you to begin to consider the possibility that there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. That means everything is all right. There is in everyone's life much to learn and understand about ourselves and about others. But what if your equipment was in perfect operating order? What if you really are sensitive, especially when you get safe and relaxed like this? So sensitive that you can trust your intuition, to realize the truth of who you are in this situation and in that. Consider what will happen and how it will feel if you let go of all the roles and all the characters and allow yourself to fall back into your true nature. You know, like those trust falls that you hear about. Maybe you've even done one in some corporate retreat, someplace where you have to fall backwards out of control, allowing others in your team to catch you. That's the feeling I'd like you to try right now. Falling backwards, out of control, but guess who catches you? The self you're interested in.
So get that it's in your self-interest to spend more time here with your higher self, free of all the fear, where your thoughts can focus and your mind is clear. It's in your self-interest to spend more time here. And as you do, what comes to you is what's right and true. With the fear away and confidence here, confusion at bay, mind focused and clear, what comes to you is what is true and what is right for you to do. It's in your self-interest to ask yourself, what's in my self-interest today? It's in your self-interest to explore inside all the different ways that you can serve your self-interest by helping others, but focusing on the all. You serve your self-interest, your enlightened self-interest, by standing 10 feet tall and giving up what's petty and small. Do what you do because it's right for you to, and where you will learn what to know is in this place, in this paradise space. This is where you go to grow.
Most models of growth suggest a quality of attainment, a reaching out, a reaching up, an ascension, even if just moving through the grades in elementary school, second grade to the third grade, moving up into junior high and high school and 12th grade. There's value in that model. It's an accurate model, but what if you added to it an understanding that your better nature is already within you? Much like an oak tree is already inside that tiny little acorn, its potential is there. If you split the acorn open, you won't see a tiny little oak tree, but its potential is clearly there. And so, while there is value in the model of attainment, of moving up the mountain, consider the game really is rigged. The best in you is in you now. It's a matter of realizing and bringing forward with self-interest and awareness that this is not merely the you or me self. It moves through harmony to the you and me self-interest, you see. Now, in a moment, Steve's going to tell you to open your eyes, wide awake and alert, back in the room, with a full memory of this exercise and an understanding of the value of practicing it. And so reorient yourself to the room around you.
And as it feels comfortable for you, take one big deep breath, open your eyes, and come back to wide awake. Back to this state of wide awake from that place I like to call narrow awake, a much more focused place, this alpha brainwave state, than this normal awake place. But we got to be here too. They both have their value. You know, one of the things you said near the end that I really liked, Michael, was about control and approval and judgment. And one of the things I noticed when I close my eyes and go to that paradise place is that stuff doesn't exist down there. And that's one of the greatest freedoms of all, is to be free of those three controlling jobs to do. Yeah, indeed.
Burdens.
Yeah.
If only we knew that, and they're all understandable. And there are times when it's appropriate to do that, but just be aware that that's what you do. I mean, why does it matter that we just the judgment alone? Why does it matter that we have to decide whether we like something or don't like something, and categorize it and then live in that rigid code or that ethic,
or maybe to just apply those to the essential things, and we don't have to judge every little detail that doesn't really have any impact on our lives at all. Spending time deciding whether you like things that mean nothing to you is a waste of your time and your energy.
But most people do it as if that's part of their job.
That's what they're supposed to do.
Got to decide whether I like broccoli or hate broccoli. Well,
nice dress, ugly dress,
Hey, thanks for being with us. Join us every week as we feed these programs to you. The series is Finding Yourself in Paradise, so we're right on theme this week. Be sure and use the forwarding gadget that we've put right under the built-in player at focusedpassion.com.
And you can check out the episodes you may have missed if you're a recent joiner to our Finding Yourself in Paradise programs. There's lots and lots of programs, over 100 of them back there in the unpurchased podcast button. So check those out. See if there's something that'll solve your problem or heal your heart today.
Yeah, complete the cycle. Pay it forward. Your job now is to pass on the good news. This is the information folks are looking for. General information about how to know themselves and realize the truth of what that self refers to, and then be interested in that. That'll change the world. It's already happening. We're seeing it. It just takes a long time, but it speaks directly to the whole reason you exist, to know yourself, to grow yourself, and to express yourself creatively in service to other people, just helping out. As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.